The silver coffee pot slipped from Violet Owens's trembling hands for the third time that morning, and she caught it just before scalding liquid could splash across a passenger's lap. Her fingers ached from gripping trays since 4 in the morning, and the endless rocking of the Texas and Pacific Railway car made her stomach pitch with each mile that carried them westward through the unforgiving landscape of West Texas in the summer of 1883. She forced a smile at the businessman who had barely glanced up from his newspaper, refilled his cup with practiced precision, and moved on to the next table where a woman in an elaborate hat complained that her eggs were cold. Violet apologized, her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping through her bones, and hurried back to the kitchen car where Cookie, the head chef, was already barking orders at the other servers. Table 7 needs more biscuits, and Table 3 is asking for jam we do not have, Violet reported, setting down the coffee pot with more force than intended. Her dark blonde hair had begun escaping its tight bun, curling damply against her neck in the oppressive heat that filled the narrow kitchen despite the open windows. Cookie, a barrel-chested man with flour perpetually dusted across his apron, grunted without looking up from the griddle. "Tell them we have what we have. This is not the Palmer House in Chicago." Violet grabbed a basket of biscuits and returned to the dining car, weaving between tables with the careful grace of someone who had spent 2 years learning to walk on a moving train. She had taken this job when she was 21, desperate for work after her father's ranch outside Presidio, Texas, had been sold to pay his debts following his death. Her mother had passed years before, leaving Violet with 2 choices: marriage to a man she did not love or finding her own way in a world that offered few opportunities for women alone. The train had seemed like freedom then. Now, at 23, it felt like a different kind of prison, one that moved endlessly forward but never really took her anywhere at all. She served the biscuits, cleared plates, refilled water glasses, and smiled until her cheeks hurt. The miles rolled past outside the windows, the landscape shifting from sparse grassland to rocky terrain as they approached the mountains. Somewhere out there was Presidio, the town where she had grown up, where she had ridden horses across her father's land and dreamed of a future that had dissolved like morning mist. The lunch service began at 11, barely giving her time to eat a dry biscuit while standing in the kitchen. More passengers, more demands, more plates balanced on her aching arms. A child spilled milk across an entire table, and Violet cleaned it up without complaint while the mother scolded the crying boy. An elderly man asked her to cut his meat because his hands shook too badly, and she did so gently, thinking of her father in his final days. By the time dinner service rolled around, Violet felt as though she might simply collapse between the tables and sleep there on the swaying floor. But she pressed on, because the alternative was unemployment, and unemployment meant true desperation. At least here she had meals, even if they were eaten standing up, and a narrow bunk in the staff car, even if she shared it with 3 other women. The dining car had filled with the evening crowd, passengers dressed in their finer clothes for the social ritual of dinner. Violet moved among them like a ghost, seen but not truly noticed, existing only to fulfill their needs. She had become expert at reading people in glances, knowing who would be demanding, who would be kind, who would try to catch her eye in ways that made her skin crawl. She was refilling wine glasses at table 5 when she first noticed him. He sat alone at a small table near the window, a man who did not quite fit with the other passengers. His clothes marked him as a working man, a cowboy, though cleaner than most she had seen. Dark hair curled slightly over his collar, and his face was tanned from long hours in the sun. He held the menu awkwardly, as if unused to such formality, and when he looked up and met her eyes, something in his gaze made her pause mid-step. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice low and courteous. "I am hoping you can help me make sense of this here menu. Half these words I cannot even pronounce." Violet felt an unexpected smile tug at her lips, a genuine one this time. "The beef stew is good," she said quietly. "Stick to what you know and you cannot go wrong." He grinned, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges that outdoor life had carved there. "Wise advice. I will take the stew and whatever comes with it." She wrote down his order, acutely aware that she was spending more time at his table than necessary, and hurried back to the kitchen. But her mind kept drifting to the cowboy with the kind eyes, and she found herself watching for his reactions as she served other tables. He ate slowly, appreciatively, in a way that suggested he was not accustomed to meals he had not cooked himself over a campfire. The evening wore on, and Violet's feet screamed with each step. She delivered desserts, cleared plates, and dodged the wandering hand of a drunk passenger that Cookie had to forcibly escort from the car. Through it all, she remained professional, efficient, invisible. She was clearing the cowboy's table, noting that he had eaten every bite when his voice stopped her. "You have been working since I boarded this morning," he said, not a question but an observation. "I have watched you serve every person in this car, and I have not seen you sit down once." Violet felt heat rise to her cheeks, uncomfortable with being observed so closely. "It is my job," she said simply. "When do you eat?" The question surprised her with its directness. "When I can." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. "That does not seem right, one person working so hard while others sit and demand more. That is the way of the world." Violet reached for his empty plate, eager to end this conversation and return to the safety of her anonymity. "Let someone serve you tonight." The words hung in the air between them, quiet but weighted with meaning. Violet froze, plate in hand, and looked at him properly for the first time. His eyes were brown, warm like sun-heated earth, and completely sincere. "I cannot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have work to finish. After then, when your shift ends, let me buy you a proper meal. You can sit down and someone else can bring you your food." Violet's first instinct was to refuse. She had learned early in her employment that passengers who showed interest were rarely to be trusted, that kindness often came with expectations she had no intention of meeting. But something in this man's manner was different, and she found herself wavering. "I do not even know your name," she said, grasping for a reasonable objection. "Thomas Randall," he said, extending his hand across the table. "People call me Tom. I am a horse breeder from up near the Caprock, been down to Austin on business, heading home now." She hesitated, then shook his hand briefly, aware that Cookie would have words for her if he saw her fraternizing with passengers. "Violet Owens. Miss Owens, I am not trying to be forward or inappropriate. I just think that someone who works as hard as you should have one meal where they are not standing up or eating scraps in a kitchen. That is all I am offering. A meal, a conversation if you want it, and then we go our separate ways when the train reaches Presidio tomorrow." Presidio, her hometown. The place she had not set foot in for 2 years, though the train passed through regularly. She always arranged to be working during those stops, unable to face the memories that waited there. "Why?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Tom's expression softened. "Because I know what it is like to be invisible, to work until your bones ache and have no one notice. My mother was a washerwoman after my father died. She worked herself into an early grave, and no one ever once thought to make her life a little easier." Maybe I cannot change the past, but I can buy a tired woman a meal. That seems like a small thing to do." The sincerity in his voice undid something in Violet's carefully constructed defenses. She nodded, a quick, jerky movement before she could reconsider. "My shift ends at 9. But just a meal, Mr. Randall, nothing more." "Just a meal," he agreed, and his smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Violet returned to work, her mind spinning. What had she done? This was foolish, potentially dangerous, and completely against her better judgment. Yet she found herself watching the clock, counting down the minutes until 9 with an anticipation she had not felt in longer than she could remember. The rest of the dinner service passed in a blur of activity. She served, cleared, cleaned, and smiled, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Cookie noticed her distraction and snapped at her twice, which was unusual enough that the other servers exchanged glances. Violet forced herself to focus, pouring coffee with steady hands and delivering desserts without error. At 8:45, she began cleaning her last tables, working efficiently to finish on time. At 8:55, she hung up her apron and told Cookie she was done for the night. He grunted acknowledgement, already focused on preparing for tomorrow's breakfast service. Violet stepped into the narrow bathroom shared by the staff and stared at her reflection in the small mirror. Her hair was a disaster, her face shiny with perspiration and exhaustion. She did what she could, pinning up the loose strands and splashing cool water on her cheeks. The same gray dress she had worn all day would have to suffice. She had no time to return to the staff car for a change of clothes, and truthfully, she owned nothing finer anyway. At precisely 9 o'clock, she found Tom waiting near the door between cars, and her heart did an unexpected flutter. He had clearly made an effort as well, his hair neatly combed and his shirt tucked in properly. "I was not sure you would come," he admitted, offering his arm. "I was not sure either," Violet replied honestly, taking his arm and allowing him to steady her as they crossed into the next car. The train swayed more dramatically between cars, and she appreciated his solid presence. He led her to the club car, a more casual space than the dining car, where passengers could order drinks and light food. Several men sat at the bar, smoking cigars and talking business, but Tom guided her to a small table in the corner, away from the crowd. A waiter appeared immediately, and Violet felt a strange disorientation at being on this side of the service. Tom ordered sandwiches and coffee for both of them, and when the waiter hurried away, Tom turned his full attention to her. "So tell me about Violet Owens," he said, leaning forward slightly. "How does a woman end up working the trains?" Violet had deflected this question countless times from curious passengers, but something about Tom's genuine interest made her answer honestly. "My father owned a small ranch outside Presidio," she began, her fingers fidgeting with the napkin on the table. "After he died, there were debts I had not known about. The ranch was sold and I found myself with no home and no prospects. My choices were limited: marry or find work. I chose work. No other family. My mother passed when I was 14. No siblings. My father was all I had." The familiar ache of loss tightened her throat, duller now than it had been 2 years ago, but never fully absent. Tom nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "I lost my parents young too. Worked ranches from the time I was 12, learned everything I could about horses. Finally saved enough to start breeding them myself. It is not easy building something from nothing." "Is it what you wanted?" Violet asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question. "I wanted land of my own, animals that were mine, a life where I answered to myself. So yes, I suppose it is. Though it is lonely sometimes, being alone on all that land with just horses for company." The waiter returned with their food, and Violet realized she was genuinely hungry, the kind of deep hunger that comes from a long day of physical labor. The sandwich was simple but well made, and she ate it slowly, savoring each bite in a way she never did when grabbing food in the kitchen. "This is strange," she said after a moment, and Tom raised an eyebrow in question. "Sitting down to eat, being served. It feels wrong, like I should be the one carrying the plates." "You will get used to it," Tom said with a smile. "Just for tonight, let yourself be the one who is taken care of." They talked as they ate, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Tom told her about his ranch near the Caprock Escarpment, describing the red cliffs and endless grasslands in a way that made her homesick for land she had never seen. He spoke of his horses with obvious affection, detailing bloodlines and training methods with the passion of a man who had found his calling. Violet found herself telling him about growing up in Presidio, about riding across her father's land in the early mornings when the air was still cool, about the Rio Grande running its ancient course nearby, and the mountains that rose up like sentinels in the distance. She told him about learning to cook from her mother, about the garden they had kept, about the dreams she had once harbored of marrying and having her own ranch someday. "What happened to those dreams?" Tom asked gently. Violet looked down at her empty plate. "They died with my father, I suppose. Or maybe they were never realistic to begin with. Dreams seldom survive contact with reality. That is a bitter thing for someone so young to believe." "I am 23, Mr. Randall, old enough to know how the world works." "Tom," he corrected. "And 23 is not old, though I suppose it feels that way sometimes. I am 26, and some days I feel ancient, especially after a long day breaking horses. But other days, I still feel like that 12-year-old boy who was certain he could do anything if he just worked hard enough." "Do you still believe that?" Tom was quiet for a moment, considering. "I believe that hard work matters, but I also believe that sometimes we need help, need someone to see us when we are struggling. I was lucky. A rancher named Bill Sawyer took me on when I was 14, taught me everything about horses, treated me like the son he never had. When he died, he left me enough money to buy my first breeding pair. Without his help, I would still be drifting from ranch to ranch, never building anything of my own." Violet felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of pride and fear that had kept her isolated for so long. "That was kind of him. It changed my life," Tom said simply. "Made me want to be the kind of person who helps others when I can. Small things, usually, but they matter." They ordered more coffee, and the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Tom had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh in a way she had not in months. He asked her opinion on things, really listened to her answers, treated her thoughts as valuable. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being seen as a person rather than simply a server in a uniform. The club car gradually emptied as passengers retired for the night, but Violet and Tom remained, talking until the waiter began giving them pointed looks. Finally, reluctantly, Tom paid the bill and they rose to leave. "I should get back to the staff car," Violet said as they stood in the narrow corridor between cars, the train swaying beneath them. "We start breakfast service at 4 in the morning." "That is cruel," Tom said, shaking his head. "How do you survive on so little sleep?" "You do what you must." But Violet found herself reluctant to end the evening, this brief respite from the grinding routine of her life. Tom seemed to feel the same hesitation. "Violet, I know I said just a meal and nothing more, and I meant it, but I would very much like to see you again. The train reaches Presidio tomorrow afternoon, correct?" Her stomach tightened. "Yes, but I will be working." "After then, will you have time after the train stops? Even just an hour, she should say no. This was madness, allowing herself to hope for something beyond the narrow confines of her existence. But the word that came out was, yes, we have a 2-hour layover in Presidio while they take on water and supplies. I could meet you at 4 o'clock. Tom's smile was radiant. 4 o'clock? Where? There is a cantina near the station, Maria's. The owner knew my father. We could meet there. Maria's at 4, Tom confirmed. I will be there. They stood for another moment, neither quite ready to part, and then Violet forced herself to step back. Good night, Tom. Good night, Violet. Sleep well. She made her way back to the staff car, climbing into her narrow bunk without disturbing her sleeping roommates. But sleep eluded her for a long time, her mind replaying every moment of the evening, every word and smile and laugh. She was being foolish, she told herself. Tom was a passenger, and tomorrow he would reach his destination, and she would continue on with the train, and this brief connection would fade like so many other transient encounters. Yet something felt different about Tom Randall, something that whispered of possibilities she had stopped allowing herself to consider. The 4 o'clock wake-up call came brutally early, and Violet dragged herself from the bunk feeling as though she had barely slept at all. The other servers moved through their morning routines in bleary silence, dressing quickly in the cramped space before heading to the kitchen car. Breakfast service was always chaotic, passengers demanding hot food quickly before disembarking at various stops. Violet fell into the familiar rhythm, pushing aside her exhaustion and her thoughts of Tom to focus on the work at hand. She poured coffee, delivered plates of eggs and bacon and biscuits, refilled juice glasses, and cleared tables with mechanical efficiency. She caught glimpses of Tom during the breakfast service, seated at the same small table by the window. He met her eyes once and smiled, and she felt her cheeks flush with warmth before she hurried away. Cookie noticed and muttered something under his breath about servers who did not keep their minds on their work, and Violet forced herself to avoid looking in Tom's direction again. The morning passed in a blur of activity as the train made several stops, passengers departing and new ones boarding. The landscape outside shifted gradually, becoming more familiar as they approached Presidio. Violet felt her stomach tighten with each mile, the complicated mixture of longing and dread that always accompanied her rare thoughts of home. Lunch service was lighter than usual, and by 2 o'clock, Violet was cleaning the last of the tables, her body aching but her mind racing with anticipation. 2 more hours until Presidio, until her meeting with Tom, until she would have to decide what she truly wanted. Cookie dismissed her early, surprising her by saying she had worked hard lately and deserved a break. Violet returned to the staff car and changed into her one good dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had made years ago. It was worn but clean, and it made her feel more like herself than the gray uniform ever did. She brushed her hair until it shone, pinning it up carefully, and allowed herself a moment to look in the small mirror. She saw a young woman with tired eyes but good bone structure, ordinary but not plain, the kind of face that people tended to overlook. But today, with anticipation brightening her expression, she looked almost pretty. The train began to slow, and Violet felt her heart accelerate in response. Through the window, she could see the familiar landscape of Presidio appearing, the scattered buildings and the Rio Grande glinting in the afternoon sun. Home, she thought, and the word carried complex emotions she could not fully untangle. The train pulled into the station with a screech of brakes and a hiss of steam, and passengers began gathering their belongings. Violet waited until most had disembarked before stepping down onto the platform, the solid ground strange beneath her feet after days on the swaying train. Presidio had not changed much in 2 years, at least not that she could see from the station. The same adobe buildings, the same dusty streets, the same mountains rising in the distance. She spotted Maria's cantina just across from the station, exactly where it had always been, and began walking toward it with purpose. She was early, arriving at 3:45, but she preferred waiting to being late. The cantina was quiet in the afternoon lull between lunch and dinner, and Maria herself looked up from wiping down tables as Violet entered. "Dios mío, Violet Owens!" Maria exclaimed, dropping her cloth and hurrying forward to embrace her. "Where have you been, child? I have not seen you in so long." Violet returned the embrace, feeling tears prick her eyes at the familiar warmth. "I have been working, Maria, on the trains." Maria pulled back, studying her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look tired, too thin. Are they feeding you properly on those trains?" "I am fine," Violet assured her, though Maria's motherly concern undid something in her chest. "I am meeting someone here, actually. A man named Tom Randall. Is it all right if we sit for a while?" Maria's eyebrows rose speculatively. "A man. This is good news." "Sit anywhere you like, and I will bring you something to drink." "On the house." Violet chose a table by the window where she could watch for Tom, and Maria brought her a glass of cold water flavored with lime. The older woman lingered, clearly curious, but Violet provided no details, and eventually Maria returned to her work with a knowing smile. At precisely 4 o'clock, Tom appeared in the doorway, and Violet felt her breath catch. He looked different in the full afternoon light, more solid and real than he had seemed on the train, and she felt a flutter of nervousness as he spotted her and smiled. "You came," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "I said I would." "I know, but I was still half afraid you would change your mind." Tom accepted a glass of water from Maria, who was watching the interaction with obvious interest. "This is Maria," Violet said. "She owned this cantina when I was growing up. Maria, this is Tom Randall." "A pleasure," Tom said, shaking Maria's hand respectfully. Maria beamed at him. "Any friend of Violet's is welcome here. I will bring you some food, yes. You both look like you need feeding." Before either could protest, she bustled away, and Violet found herself laughing. "Maria is convinced the whole world is starving and only her cooking can save them." "I like her already," Tom said, his eyes warm as they rested on Violet. "You look beautiful. I meant to say that right away, but I got distracted." Violet felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look well, too." They talked while Maria brought plates of enchiladas and rice, setting them down with a satisfied nod before leaving them alone. Violet discovered she was hungry again despite having eaten lunch, and the familiar flavors of Maria's cooking tasted like home in a way that brought both comfort and pain. "Tell me about growing up here," Tom said as they ate. "What was it like?" Violet found herself opening up in ways she rarely did, describing her childhood in Presidio with a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow. She told him about learning to ride before she could read properly, about swimming in the Rio Grande on hot summer days, about the way her mother's garden had bloomed despite the harsh climate. She spoke of her father's ranch, small but productive, and the pride he had taken in his cattle. "He wanted me to marry the son of a neighboring rancher," she admitted. "James Crawford. He was nice enough, but there was no spark between us, no connection. I kept putting off the engagement, saying I was too young and my father did not push. Then he got sick, so sudden, and within 3 months he was gone. That was when I learned about the debts, the loans he had taken out trying to keep the ranch going through a bad drought. Everything was sold, including the wedding ring that had been my mother's. I took the train job because it was the only work I could find that offered room and board." Tom reached across the table and took her hand, the gesture gentle and grounding. That must have been devastating. It was like losing everything twice, Violet said quietly. First my father, then my home, then any future I had imagined. The train job saved me from destitution, but it trapped me too. I send most of my wages to pay off the remaining debts, little by little. It will take years. What would you do if you were free of the debt? Tom asked. If you could choose anything. No one had asked her that in so long that Violet had to think carefully about her answer. I would want land again, she said finally. Not a big ranch, just a small place where I could grow things, maybe raise a few horses. I would want a home that was mine, that no one could take away. And I would want someone to share it with, someone who saw me as a partner, not property. Tom's hand tightened on hers. That does not seem like too much to want. It might as well be the moon, Violet said with a sad smile. I have $27 saved after 2 years of work. Land costs hundreds, thousands. I will be working that train until I am old and gray. What if there was another way? Tom said, his voice suddenly intense. What if you did not have to do this alone? Violet felt her heart begin to pound. What do you mean? Tom took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. I know this is fast, probably too fast, and you have every right to think I am crazy. But Violet, I felt something yesterday when we talked, something I have never felt before. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and you deserve so much better than the life you are living. My ranch is not huge, but it is profitable and it is growing. I have a good house, land that produces, horses that are starting to gain a reputation. What I do not have is someone to share it with, someone who understands what it means to work hard and dream of better things. Tom, Violet whispered, not sure if she was stopping him or encouraging him. Come with me, he said, his brown eyes locked on hers. Come to my ranch, see if you like it, see if you could imagine a life there. No obligations, no promises, just a chance to see if this connection between us is real or just something we both wanted so badly we imagined it. Violet's mind raced. This was insane. She barely knew this man. Walking away from her job, her security, the debt she still owed, all to follow a cowboy to his ranch based on 2 conversations and a feeling. It was the kind of foolishness that ruined women's lives. But it was also the first real hope she had felt in 2 years, the first possibility of something beyond endless service and exhaustion. Tom was not offering marriage or making false promises. He was simply offering her a chance, a doorway to a different kind of life. I have debts, she said, grasping for rational objections. The train company expects me back tonight. I have no money, no way to repay you if this does not work out. The debts can be paid, Tom said. I have money saved. As for the train company, they can find another server. There are always women desperate for work, but you deserve a chance at something better, and I would like to be the one to offer it to you. Why? The question burst out of her. Why me? You could court someone local, someone you know, someone respectable with a family and a good name. Tom's smile was gentle. Because when I watched you work yesterday, I saw myself in you, the determination to keep going no matter how hard it got. Because when we talked last night, I felt like I was finally having a real conversation instead of just exchanging pleasantries. Because you have dreams you have not given up on, even when you should have. And because I think you feel it too, this sense that maybe we could be something good together. He was right. She did feel it, that pull toward him that defied logic and reason. Violet looked around the cantina, at Maria humming as she cleaned, at the familiar walls that held so many memories. Then she looked at Tom, at his honest face and hopeful eyes, and felt something inside her shift and settle. I cannot just abandon my responsibilities, she said slowly, thinking it through. I need to return to the train, collect my things, and tell Cookie I am leaving. It is the right thing to do." Tom's face fell slightly. "Of course, I understand." "But after that," Violet continued, her voice growing stronger, "I would like to see your ranch. I would like to see if this feeling between us is real. I cannot promise anything beyond that, but I am willing to try." Tom's smile blazed like the sun. "That is all I am asking. Try, see. Give it a chance." They made plans quickly. Tom would wait in Presidio while Violet returned to the train for the evening service and collected her belongings. The train would continue west after the layover, but another train would return eastbound tomorrow morning. Violet would resign her position tonight and take the eastbound train back to Presidio at 8 in the morning, where Tom would be waiting. It meant one more dinner service, one more night on the swaying train, but it also meant doing things properly, with integrity. Violet felt nervous and exhilarated in equal measure as they left the cantina, Maria watching them with an approving smile. "I will see you tomorrow," Tom said as they stood outside the station, the train already beginning to blow its departure whistle. "And Violet, thank you for taking this chance. I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you do not regret it." Violet stood on her toes and kissed his cheek quickly, a brief press of lips that felt both daring and right. "Until tomorrow, Tom." She hurried back to the train, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The familiar interior of the staff car felt different now, like something she was already leaving behind. She changed back into her uniform mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Cookie took the news of her resignation badly, as she had expected, ranting about the inconvenience and the difficulty of finding reliable staff. But he also softened when she offered to work through the dinner service, giving him time to send a telegram ahead to the next major station requesting a replacement server. The evening service felt surreal, going through the familiar motions while knowing it was her last time. Violet served meals, poured wine, cleared plates, and smiled at passengers, but her mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow, to Tom, to the possibility of a different life. The other servers noticed her distraction and peppered her with questions during their brief break. Violet admitted she was leaving but provided few details, unwilling to invite skepticism or warnings. Let them think what they wanted. She was 23 years old and entitled to make her own choices, even risky ones. That night in her bunk, Violet lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic clacking of the train wheels. Was she making a terrible mistake? Probably. Was it worth the risk? Her heart said yes with a certainty that overruled her practical mind's doubts. She had spent 2 years in safe misery, and what had it gotten her? $27 and perpetually aching feet. Maybe it was time to choose hope over security, possibility over certainty. Maybe Tom was exactly what he seemed, a good man offering a genuine chance at happiness. Or maybe she would be on another train in a month, looking for a new job and regretting her foolishness. But she would never know unless she tried, and that realization settled her racing thoughts. She had been existing rather than living, surviving rather than thriving. Whatever happened next, at least it would be something different, something she had chosen for herself. The eastbound train pulled into Presidio at 8:15 the next morning, slightly behind schedule, and Violet stepped onto the platform carrying a single worn carpetbag that held everything she owned. Her palms were sweating despite the morning coolness, and she scanned the small crowd anxiously. Tom was there, standing near the station entrance, his hat in his hands and relief flooding his face when he spotted her. He hurried forward, and Violet felt her anxiety dissolve at the warmth in his eyes. "You came," he said, echoing his words from yesterday. "I said I would," she replied, and this time the words felt like a vow, a commitment to see this through. Tom took her bag and offered his other arm, which she accepted gratefully. "My horse is at the livery. It is about a day's ride to my ranch, so I thought we could get a room at the hotel for tonight, separate rooms," he added quickly, "and head out first thing tomorrow morning, unless you would rather start today." Violet appreciated his consideration even as she realized the implications. They were not married, and traveling together would raise eyebrows at best and ruin her reputation at worst. But she had already burned her bridges by leaving the train, so what did reputation matter now? "Tomorrow is fine," she said. "I would like to spend a little time in Presidio first. There are places I have been avoiding for 2 years." Tom nodded, understanding. "We can do whatever you need." They walked through the town together, Violet pointing out landmarks from her childhood, the general store where her mother had traded eggs for fabric, the church where her parents had married, the school she had attended until she was 13. Everything looked smaller than she remembered, more worn down, but still achingly familiar. They ended up at the small cemetery on the edge of town, where Violet stood before her parents' graves for the first time since her father's funeral. Someone had maintained the sites, probably Maria, keeping the weeds clear and the simple markers upright. Violet knelt and traced her father's name with her fingertips, the carved letters smooth with time. "I am trying something new, Papa," she whispered. "Something that might be foolish or might be wonderful. I wish you were here to advise me, but I think maybe you would approve. He is a good man, I can feel it, and he makes me want to hope again." Tom stood a respectful distance away, giving her space for this private moment. When she finally rose and returned to his side, he took her hand without a word, and they walked back toward town in comfortable silence. They ate lunch at Maria's again, the older woman fussing over Violet and clearly approving of Tom. Over enchiladas and conversation, Violet told Tom more about her parents, and he shared memories of his own family, the good times before his father's death and the hard times after. "My mother would have liked you," Tom said thoughtfully. "She always said I should find a woman with spine, someone who would not break under the hard times. You have spine, Violet." "I have not broken yet," Violet agreed, "but I have bent pretty far." "Bending is not breaking," Tom pointed out. "It is surviving which is harder." They spent the afternoon walking through Presidio, and Violet found herself relaxing into Tom's presence in a way that felt natural and right. He was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, and thoughtful in his observations. He treated her as an equal, asking her opinions and listening to her answers with genuine interest. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tom walked Violet to the hotel and secured 2 rooms as promised. They ate dinner in the hotel restaurant, a simple meal that nonetheless felt special because they were sharing it together. "Tomorrow we ride out early," Tom said as they lingered over coffee. "It is a long day's journey to the ranch, pretty country but rough in places. Can you still ride?" "It has been 2 years, but I grew up on horseback," Violet said. "I will manage. I rented you a good horse from the livery, gentle but sturdy. We will take it slow." Tom paused, his expression turning serious. "Violet, I want you to know that when we get to the ranch, you will have your own room, your own space. I am not expecting anything except your company and the chance to know you better. If you decide this is not right for you, I will bring you back to town myself. No hard feelings." Violet reached across the table and took his hand, marveling at how quickly this gesture had become familiar. "I know. I trust you, Tom, which is probably crazy given how little time we have known each other, but I do." They parted at the top of the stairs, Tom squeezing her hand once before heading to his room and Violet entering hers. The room was small but clean, the bed more comfortable than her narrow bunk on the train. Violet lay awake for a long time, processing the rapid changes in her life. But when she finally slept, it was deeply and without dreams. Morning came bright and clear, and Violet dressed in her most practical clothes, grateful she had kept her riding skirt from her ranch days. Tom met her downstairs with a look of approval, and after a quick breakfast, they headed to the livery. The horse Tom had rented for her was a sturdy mare with kind eyes, and Violet felt a rush of joy as she swung into the saddle. Her body remembered the movements instinctively, settling into the familiar rhythm, and she could not suppress a grin as Tom mounted his own horse, a handsome gelding with excellent conformation. "You look happy," Tom observed as they rode out of Presidio, the sun warm on their backs. "I feel happy," Violet admitted. "It has been so long since I have been on a horse, I forgot how much I missed it." They rode north and east, following rough roads that gradually gave way to open rangeland. The landscape was stark but beautiful, endless grassland dotted with mesquite, and the occasional windmill marking a ranch. Tom pointed out landmarks, explaining the territory with the easy knowledge of someone who knew it intimately. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the lunch Maria had packed for them, sitting in the shade of a rocky outcropping. Violet stretched her legs, feeling muscles protest that had grown unused to riding, but the discomfort was welcome, a sign of freedom rather than exhaustion. "How much farther?" she asked, accepting a canteen of water from Tom. "Another 4 hours, maybe 5. We will arrive before sunset." Tom studied her face. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," Violet said honestly. "I am sore, but it is a good kind of sore." They rode on, and as the afternoon progressed, the landscape began to change. The grassland rose gradually, and in the distance, Violet could see the red cliffs of the Caprock escarpment that Tom had described. The sight took her breath away, the layered stone glowing in the afternoon light like a painted wall marking the edge of the world. "It is beautiful," she breathed, and Tom's smile was proud. "Wait until you see the ranch. The house sits on a rise overlooking the draw where the horses graze. You can see for miles in every direction." As they drew closer, Violet began to see signs of habitation, fences in good repair marking property lines, windmills turning steadily in the constant breeze, and eventually, cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. Then they topped a rise, and there it was. Tom's ranch spread out before them, modest in scale but clearly well managed. The house was a solid structure of wood and stone with a wide porch across the front. Outbuildings included a large barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse. In the nearest pasture, horses grazed, their coats gleaming in the late afternoon sun. "Welcome to the Randall Ranch," Tom said, and there was both pride and nervousness in his voice. "It is not much yet, but it is mine, and it is growing." Violet felt tears prick her eyes, though she could not have said exactly why. Perhaps it was the sight of the home Tom had built through hard work and determination, or perhaps it was the realization that he was offering to share it with her. "It is wonderful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. They rode down to the house, and as they approached, a Mexican man emerged from the barn waving a greeting. Tom waved back and called out in Spanish, and the man responded with a grin, hurrying forward to take the horse's reins as they dismounted. "Violet, this is Esteban Garcia," Tom said, switching back to English. "He works for me, helps with the horses and the ranch work." "Esteban, this is Miss Violet Owens. She will be staying with us for a while." Esteban tipped his hat respectfully, his eyes kind. "Welcome, Miss Owens. It is good to have a woman's presence here again. This place needs softening." Violet liked him instantly. "Thank you, Mr. Garcia." Just Esteban, please." He took the horse's reins. "I will take care of these two. You show the lady her new home, Tom." Tom carried Violet's bag as he led her to the house, opening the front door with a gesture that invited her to enter first. The interior was clean but clearly a bachelor's domain, functional rather than decorated. The main room served as both living area and kitchen, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Doors led off to what Violet assumed were bedrooms. "It is not fancy," Tom said, setting her bag down and removing his hat. "But it is solid and comfortable. The bedroom to the left is mine. The one to the right is yours, at least for now. There is a washroom out back with a pump, and I have been meaning to install an indoor pump in the kitchen. I just have not gotten around to it yet." Violet walked through the space, taking in details: the well-made furniture, the books stacked on a shelf, the clean windows that let in the golden evening light. It was exactly what she would have expected from Tom, practical and honest, a home rather than a showplace. "Show me my room," she asked, and Tom opened the door to the right. The room was smaller than the main one but charming in its simplicity. A bed covered with a quilt dominated one wall, a dresser and washstand occupied another, and a window looked out toward the pasture where the horses grazed. It was more space than she had had to herself since leaving her father's house, and it was hers, at least temporarily. "It is perfect," Violet said, turning to Tom with a genuine smile. "Thank you for this, for all of it." Tom stepped forward, then seemed to think better of it, maintaining a respectful distance. "I am just glad you are here. I will let you settle in and then we can make some dinner. I am a decent cook, nothing fancy, but I have not starved yet." They worked together in the kitchen, Tom showing her where things were kept while she helped prepare a simple meal of beans and cornbread. It felt domestic and comfortable, falling into an easy rhythm as if they had been doing this for years rather than hours. Esteban joined them for dinner, regaling them with stories about the horses and some of the ranch mishaps that had occurred while Tom was away in Austin. The conversation flowed easily, and Violet found herself laughing more than she had in months, the sound rusty but genuine. After dinner, Tom walked her out to the porch, and they sat in chairs overlooking the darkening landscape. Stars were beginning to appear, more stars than Violet had ever seen, unpolluted by city lights, a vast canopy of light overhead. "I used to sit out here every night when I first built the house," Tom said quietly. "Partly because the sunset is beautiful, but mostly because I could not quite believe it was real, that I actually owned this land, this house, this future. I wanted to drink it in, to prove to myself it was not a dream." Violet understood that feeling, the need to hold onto something precious because you feared it would slip away. "And now I still sit out here most nights, but for different reasons. To appreciate what I have rather than to convince myself it is real." Tom turned to look at her, his face shadowed in the twilight. "I am glad you are here, Violet. This place has felt empty, like it was waiting for something. Maybe it was waiting for you." Violet felt her heart squeeze. "Tom, you barely know me. What if I am not what you think I am? What if I disappoint you?" "Then we will figure it out together," Tom said simply. "But I do not think you will. I am a pretty good judge of character, comes from working with horses. They do not lie or pretend, so you learn to read what is real. And you are real, Violet. That is what drew me to you in the first place." They sat in companionable silence as the night deepened around them, and Violet felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness that she had not experienced in years. This was not the life she had planned, but perhaps it was the life she was meant to find. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and wonderful to Violet. She woke early, no longer to the harsh clang of a train bell but to the soft sounds of morning on a ranch, roosters crowing and horses nickering for their breakfast. Tom and Esteban taught her the routines of the ranch, showing her how to feed the horses, check water troughs, and mend fences. Violet rediscovered muscles she had forgotten she had, her body aching in new ways as she adapted to physical labor that was demanding but satisfying. Unlike the endless, thankless work on the train, ranch work produced visible results. Fences were repaired, horses were trained, meals were prepared and shared. There was purpose in it, a sense of building something rather than simply maintaining. Tom was patient and encouraging, never making her feel inadequate when she struggled with unfamiliar tasks. He showed her how to handle the horses, explaining their personalities and quirks, and Violet found herself falling in love with the animals, especially a young mare named Daisy, who seemed to take a particular liking to her. In the evenings after dinner, Tom and Violet would sit on the porch and talk, sharing their days and their thoughts. The conversations ranged from practical discussions about ranch management to deeper explorations of their hopes and fears. Violet felt herself opening up in ways she never had before, trusting Tom with parts of herself she had kept hidden. "Tell me about your dreams," Tom said one evening about a week after her arrival. "Not the practical ones, the impossible ones." "What would you want if you knew you could have anything?" Violet considered the question seriously. "I would want a family," she said finally. "Not just a husband and children, though I want those too, but a real family, people who chose to be together and supported each other. I would want to grow things, see them flourish under my care. And I would want to matter, to know that my life made a difference to someone." Tom reached over and took her hand, the gesture that had become familiar and comforting. "Those are not impossible dreams, Violet. They are just waiting to happen." "What about you?" she asked. "What are your impossible dreams?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "I dream of building something that lasts, a ranch that will be here for generations. I dream of horses with my ranch's brand becoming known throughout Texas and beyond for their quality. And I dream of having someone to share it all with, someone who sees this place the way I do and helps me make it better." The unspoken implication hung in the air between them, and Violet felt her heart rate accelerate. They were edging closer to something significant, to declarations that would change everything. She was not sure if she was ready, but she also knew she wanted it, wanted him, wanted this life they were carefully constructing together. The next day, Tom took her to see more of the ranch, riding out to check on cattle grazing in the farther pastures. They packed a lunch and made a day of it, and Violet reveled in the freedom of riding across open land, the wind in her hair and the sun on her face. They stopped at a spring-fed pool surrounded by cottonwood trees, a hidden oasis in the rough landscape, and Tom spread out a blanket while Violet explored the area. The water was clear and cool, bubbling up from underground sources, and she knelt beside it, trailing her fingers in the current. "This is beautiful," she said, looking back at Tom. "How did you find it?" "Luck, mostly. I was tracking a stray calf and stumbled across it. I come here sometimes when I need to think, to get away from everything." Tom joined her by the water, sitting close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I wanted to share it with you." Violet turned to look at him, really look at him, seeing the man who had appeared on the train and offered her a different life. His face was honest and open, his eyes warm with affection, and she realized with sudden clarity that she had fallen in love with him. It had happened gradually, day by day, conversation by conversation, until love was simply a fact, undeniable and essential. "Tom," she said softly, and he turned to meet her gaze. "Yes, I need to tell you something." Violet took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "When I got on that eastbound train in Presidio, I was terrified. I had no idea if I was making the best decision of my life or the worst mistake. But these past 2 weeks have shown me something important. This is not a mistake. This feels like coming home." Tom's eyes lit with hope. "Does that mean you want to stay?" "It means I do not want to leave," Violet said carefully. "But Tom, we need to be realistic. I am living in your house, dependent on your generosity, with no clear status. People in town must be talking. I do not want to ruin your reputation or put you in an awkward position." Tom cupped her face with both hands, the gesture tender and possessive. "Violet Owens, I do not give a damn what people in town say. But if you are worried about propriety, then let me make this proper. Marry me. Not someday, not when we know each other better, but soon. Be my wife, my partner in this ranch and in life. Help me build something good here." Violet's heart soared even as her practical mind raised objections. "Tom, we have only known each other for 2 weeks. I have known enough people to recognize when something is right," Tom countered. "Have you ever felt this before, this certainty?" "No," Violet admitted. "Never." "Then trust it. Trust me. Trust us." Tom's thumbs brushed her cheekbones gently. "I love you, Violet. I know it is fast and probably crazy, but I do. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I love how you handle the horses and how you are not afraid to get your hands dirty. I love coming home and seeing you on the porch, knowing you chose to be here. Marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks, but they were happy tears, tears of relief and joy and overwhelming emotion. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not want to admit it because it seemed too soon, too impossible. But I do, Tom, I love you." Tom kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate, more profound. Violet wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the longing and hope she had been holding inside, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Is that a yes?" Tom asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Violet said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They stayed by the spring for another hour, making plans and dreaming aloud about their future. Tom wanted to be married as soon as possible, and Violet agreed, seeing no reason to wait. They would go into Presidio tomorrow, obtain a license, and find a minister. It would be a simple ceremony, nothing fancy, but it would bind them together legally and morally. When they finally rode back to the ranch, Esteban took one look at their faces and broke into a wide grin. "About time," he said, shaking Tom's hand and bowing over Violet's. "Congratulations to you both. This ranch finally has a mistress." That night, Violet wrote a letter to Maria, explaining everything and inviting her to the wedding. It felt important to have someone there who represented her past, her family, her connection to the life she had left behind. Then she sat on her bed, looking around the room that would soon no longer be hers alone, and felt peace settle over her. 2 days later, Violet and Tom stood before a minister in the small church in Presidio, with Maria and Esteban as their witnesses. Violet wore her blue cotton dress, the best she owned, and Tom had borrowed a proper suit from a friend in town. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, and when Tom slipped a simple gold band on her finger and kissed her as his wife, Violet felt as though her entire life had been leading to this moment. Maria hosted a small celebration at the cantina, inviting a few of the townspeople who remembered Violet from before. It was joyful and uncomplicated, everyone genuinely happy for the young couple who had found each other against the odds. Violet danced with Tom, her husband, and felt lighter than air. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, the same hotel where they had stayed in separate rooms just weeks before. But tonight they were together, and Violet discovered that the passion she had felt by the spring was only a fraction of what they could share. Tom was gentle and patient, concerned with her comfort and pleasure, and by morning Violet felt transformed, no longer a solitary individual but part of something greater. They returned to the ranch the next day as husband and wife, and Violet threw herself into making the house feel like a home. She ordered fabric from the general store and sewed curtains for the windows. She planted a garden in a sunny spot near the house, starting with seeds Maria had given her as a wedding present. She learned to cook the meals Tom loved and experimented with new recipes. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Tom's reputation as a horse breeder grew, and buyers came from increasingly distant locations to purchase his animals. Violet proved to have a natural gift for training, particularly with the younger horses, and she and Tom worked side by side to build the business. Months passed, turning into a year, and Violet fell more deeply in love with Tom and with the life they were creating together. There were hard times, a drought that tested their water supplies, a bout of illness that swept through the horses, but they faced each challenge as a team, supporting each other through the difficulties. On a cool evening in early spring, Violet stood on the porch watching the sunset and felt Tom's arms wrap around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. She leaned into his warmth, content and complete. "Happy," Tom murmured against her hair. "Impossibly happy," Violet replied. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." "Believe it. You deserve every bit of happiness this world can offer." Tom's hand splayed across her stomach, and Violet felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. "Tom," she said, covering his hands with her own. "There is something I need to tell you." She felt him tense slightly. "What is it?" Violet turned in his arms, looking up into his beloved face. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Tom's expression cycled through shock, joy, and awe in rapid succession. Then he let out a whoop of pure happiness, lifting Violet off her feet and spinning her around before carefully setting her down as if she might break. "A baby? Are you sure?" "I am sure. I saw the doctor in town yesterday when I went for supplies. He confirmed it. We will have a child by late autumn."